Okay. Yes. No, man to his left. Yeah.
First point to Jenny Mara. You said that you're pushing again for the SNP to put in their manifesto that they would have another referendum.
No.
The clue is in the name, the Scottish National Party. Their aim has never changed. It's like saying the Green Party wouldn't, if they lost an election, would cease to be a Green Party.
Yes.
They are always for independence. Get used to it. The second point is Ruth Davidson. David Cameron clearly came up to Scotland and the whole Project Fear team and told the people of Scotland, if you vote no, you will be guaranteed to stay in the EU. If you vote yes, Scotland will be out the EU. That was a definite, repeated threat to the Scottish people. The third point, can I just get to Willie Rennie?
You can't go all around the panel because we'll be here all night. No, hold on a second. Hold on. Did you or did you not know there was going to be a referendum on whether Britain as a whole should stay in the EU?
Promised in 2013.
Yes, but the conflict between that was David Cameron and Project Fear coming to Scotland.
But these are two different things, aren't they?
One is to have to vote no to stay in
One is to say if you leave the UK, you're on your own. You'll have to make your own decisions versus the EU and membership.
Yes.
The other is stay, but there is going to be a referendum. I don't quite get what you're saying.
It was most definitely not expressed in that fashion. It was expressed in the fashion: vote no, and you're guaranteed to keep your membership of the European Union. That's what the Prime Minister promised to deliver.
Well, you were taken in, John, weren't you? Because you'd forgotten the referendum was coming.
Well, that's what people in Scotland, that's what was in the minds of people in Scotland, that's what they were told.
Mind? Did you have forgotten the referendum?
Well, I voted yes in the referendum, David.
No, but on the European referendum.
I'm very proud that I voted yes in the Scottish referendum.
You haven't voted on the EU referendum yet, that's what I'm talking about. But you say in the middle there, shaking your head again. Let's hear from you.
Davidson made my point that we knew there would be an EU referendum if the Tories won the 2015 general election. So we voted no for better or worse. And John Swinney is effectively saying we were too stupid to understand that point, and he holds all the no voters in complete contempt. Incredibly insulting.
Yes.
The thing that astonishes me, actually, is not that John Swinney or anybody else is forever banging on about a second referendum. It's the parties that were on the no side that can't give up talking about a second referendum. It's really quite bewildering. Look, we've got two choices.
Stop as soon as they repeat the words. Once in a generation, I will happily never mention it again. But for as long as they, say, for as long as they continue to threaten and push, someone has to stand up for the no voters.
Two choices to make in Scotland in the coming months. One is what kind of government are we going to elect, and what kind of parliament are we going to elect, bold enough and strong enough to hold the government to account. And the second is whether we wish to stay members of a European Union which does strive for controls on bankers' excesses when the UK government tries to block it, whether we want to stay part of a European Union that does try to get some degree of collective response to a humanitarian crisis in Europe, the likes of which we haven't seen for generations, when a UK government is saying we want none of it. I know which way I'm voting on both those issues.
Let's just take we can't stick on Europe all the time, but I just want to take this question from John Gordon, if we can find you, John Gordon.
Hi. Is the in-out vote on Europe not important enough to listen to what the Queen thinks about it?
Yes. Do you think it is?
Well, I think she does more for the country than half of the people elected in Westminster.
Because the Sun, of course, had a headline this week saying Queen backs Brexit, and reports her as telling MPs at a reception, I don't understand Europe, and later saying the EU is heading in the wrong direction. So the question is, why shouldn't we know what the Queen thinks? Tim Stanley, do you think we should know what the Queen thinks?
Only if she wanted us to know. And the important point about that conversation is that it was a private conversation. Now, when the news got out, the newspaper was right to report it because that's what newspapers exist to do. What shouldn't have happened is that politicians shouldn't have gossiped about what the Queen may or may not have allegedly said in private. Okay. That was a mistake. Now, having said all of that, though, whenever we think about the monarchy and its role in politics and public life, it's very much shaped by the particular kind of monarch that Elizabeth II has chosen to be. Historically, it's quite unusual to have a monarch who is this removed from politics. Queen Victoria, for instance, used to write passionate letters to the newspapers demanding a ban on animal testing. So actually, monarchs have quite often been involved in politics, and it wouldn't surprise me if a monarch was concerned about the loss of sovereignty. It wouldn't surprise me if a monarch was concerned about the costs of being a member of the European Union. And it wouldn't surprise me if a monarch privately felt, we're the 5th largest economy in the world. We're a damn important country. We can afford to go it alone.
But the question is not. The question is not whether you, Tim Stanley, would be surprised at what you think the Queen may or may not think, but whether all of us should be entitled on an issue as important to know what she thinks. Is that what the question is?
No, because that's not her constitutional role.
Well, okay,
she's not there to do that. But having said that, if she had intended people to know, then obviously we should know. But again, just to re-emphasise, we know that in the 1980s, we're pretty sure that the Queen spoke about how she was distressed at the state of poverty in Britain. We know she was concerned about the state of the Commonwealth and about apartheid in South Africa. Don't imagine that monarchs literally have no political views.
So, John Swinney, when she said just before the Scottish referendum, I hope people will think very carefully about the future, in your view, was that a deliberate, intentional intervention?
No, I don't. I think it was the Queen setting out that kind of thoughtful position that we would expect from the Queen. And I think the point that I agree with from what Tim has said is that if the Queen's had a private conversation with senior members of the government on Privy Council terms, which are, we all know what those rules mean, they're supposed to be kept private, then, and a member of the government has thought it fit to go to Rupert Murdoch's wedding and then have a conversation there, which miraculously results in this story being reported on the front page of The Sun, I think it says more about senior members of the government than it says about the Queen.
So you think it was Michael Gove, do you?
Well, is it just me that's been wound up by that conspiracy theory, or is that maybe something that might have happened? I think, essentially, if the Queen is going to be outside of politics, which she's chosen to be, other than on the occasions where Tim quite rightly says she says something definitive, publicly, with her own words, then I think we should respect the Queen's decision not to be involved in politics.
All right, you sit up there.
Yeah, I'd just like to take the panel up on the idea that the Queen is supposedly outside of politics when, as you've just been discussing, she was apparently having some kind of tirade in a Privy Council meeting over lunch, and quite possibly that may have been what maybe influenced Michael Gove.
Oh, he was
She's a masterful politician,
Queen,
and with the calibre of some of our actual elected politicians, it's quite possible she's exerting much more of an influence than she should.
So she managed to win over Michael Gove.
You can picture the scene, can't you? You can imagine it. You can imagine it.
I suspect it wasn't a tirade.
I think I would go on further than the original question of John when he said that he thinks that the Queen's done more than most elected politicians. I actually think she's probably done more than all elected politicians put together for the last 64 years. And I think that there's a difference between unnamed sources gossiping about somebody else and gossiping about somebody who has done so much, particularly because she stayed above politics and had a studied neutrality, because she's not able to then correct the record the next day and phone up the Sun. I think what we should all remember in this story as well is that, one, the palace has denied it and has launched and has asked for an investigation to be launched by Ipso. Two, the Deputy Prime Minister, who was supposed to be one of the protagonists in this conversation, has utterly denied it. And three, the only people that seem to have graced the pages of the Sun with this are utterly anonymous and won't put their hands up. So we seem to have a story here that nobody can stand up. And I think that when you have a person like the Queen, who has done so much for her country because she stayed above politics and is unable to then make her position clear after the fact, actually I think that while I understand newspapers have to report news, I think this would have been best left alone by the people that spoke to the Sun newspaper.
Okay. Anybody else want to come in on this? Yes.
Yeah, I mean, whether you take a positive view or not of how the current monarch has done her job, there is a very good reason why she's not entitled to have a vote, either in elections or in a referendum. You know, if this is someone who wished to be a private citizen and to exercise a vote, maybe even a vote for who the head of state would be, and we could all have a vote on that, I would welcome it. Obviously, it's difficult for someone in that position not to form a personal private view, but to take a political stance, whether in relation to members of the Privy Council or in any other setting, I think is entirely at odds with her current role. And if this private citizen called Elizabeth Windsor wanted to have that different role, she should say so. The thing that nauseates me...
Are you alleging that the story is true? Are you implying it's true?
It's in the Sun, so you form your own judgment. The thing that nauseates me...
I don't know what you mean by that. I mean...
The thing that nauseates me most about this story actually was hearing the editor of the Sun on the radio this morning claiming that they've done this to stand up for ordinary people against powerful elites. To hear the editor of a Murdoch-owned newspaper saying that we should all pay attention to what the Queen thinks because elites are a bad thing just makes my blood boil.
Well, do you want to come in on this?
I mean, I think for the strength of our country, I think, you know, however anyone feels about the monarchy, people would recognise that one of the main advantages of our Queen now is that she has stayed out and she's taken the decision, as Tim said, monarchs have the decision to get involved in politics or not. She's taken the decision, and I think that's been a strength of our democracy, and I think that should maintain. And I think if people are having private conversations with her, then that should be respected.
Okay. Willie Rennie, do you want to come in on this?
No, it's fine. Move on. Yeah, it's fine.
You're done.
Fine, yeah.
Okay. All done, as they say in the auctioneers. I'm in the auctioneers. All done. Cathy Aliberti, please. A question from Cathy, please. Yes.
Yes. Scottish Government figures yesterday revealed a £15 billion deficit. Is the economic case for independence now dead?
All right. This goes to the heart of the whole business, I think. Ruth Davidson.
Well, somebody very close to the Independence Project, a guy called Alex Bell, who was a chief advisor to Alex Salmond during the white paper writing process, said that the economic case was dead, that you can't sell a case for low taxation, high welfare on an oil price that was unusually high, with revenues that were unassailable and unprovable, and they've been found out, and the truth of the pudding has been in the eating. I mean, I think, without going back over the very first question that we had in the programme today, you know, I think that not only is Scotland better off for being part of the United Kingdom, and we see that by the Scottish Government's own figures, the tune of £1,400 per person, but actually I think the UK is better off for having us in it, and I think that this decision have being made, we should be pulling together, and we should be trying to maximise all of our country, both sides of the border, to bring in more investment from other countries and elsewhere.
Yeah, but the argument was made was about the oil price, wasn't it? That was where the dip in the revenue came.
Well, it was actually about the oil revenue rather than the oil price. Yes. And this is the distinction that John Swinney's going to probably, I would expect, try and blur, because he likes to say that nobody suspected the oil price would drop and we all got it wrong, and that's just nonsense. The difference is, we were saying even 2 years ago, I stood up at First Minister's Questions and said that OBR says oil revenue for next year will be about £3 billion. Alex Salmond, you know, tried to swap me aside saying, don't be ridiculous, it'll be £8 billion. Well, actually, it's going to be a lot lower than that. You know, we did know that there was going to be a drop in revenue. We did know that the cost of extraction was going to be higher. We did know that there wasn't going to be as much profits, which meant we couldn't tax the companies as much, which meant there wouldn't be as much money flowing into the coffers. The difference is, the SNP didn't make a case based on the fact that we'll be independent and we might take a short-term financial hit and move on. They made a case promising people in Scotland that they would be £500 richer. They knew that case was wrong when they made it. The case was false. They knew it was false, and they tried to con the Scottish public, and I'm so glad that 2 million people voted no.
So just before I go to Mr. Swinney, you're saying that the drop in the oil price is irrelevant?
No, I'm not saying it's irrelevant. Obviously, we'd like to see a higher oil price, but what I will say is the idea that we didn't know that oil revenues would be a lot lower than they had been and a lot lower than was being promised, that is false.